Hello and welcome to GBN Originals. I'm Miriam Cates. Today we're taking a look at the eye-watering predictions for UK population growth, delving into the scale of the immigration expected over the next 10 years and considering the implications that has for our nation's future. This isn't just another statistic. These trends will fundamentally reshape Britain. Recent projections from the Office for National Statistics are stark. The UK's population is predicted to reach a staggering 72.5 million people by 2032. This would mean that the UK's population will surpass that of France for the first time in a generation. The ONS projects that between 2022 and 2032, nearly 10 million people will immigrate into the UK long term. That's a number equivalent to the entire population of Sweden, all within a single decade. Now, some people will leave, of course. The ONS anticipates around 5 million immigrants during the same period. But the net result? A population increase of nearly 5 million people solely due to migration. If nothing changes, this means that by 2050, nearly 30% of people in the UK will have been born in another country. It's crucial to understand that this growth isn't coming from natural increase. In fact, the non-immigrant population is expected to remain flat, with births and deaths roughly balancing each other out at around 6.8 million each. In fact, the projections for births are likely to be an overestimate because the ONS has failed to recognise the speed of Britain's declining birth rate. This means that every single person added to our population over the next decade will be the result of net migration. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't about demonising immigrants. The vast majority have come to the UK legally. It is the government's decision to issue those visas. But we can't ignore the practical challenges that come with such rapid population growth. Think about it, 4.9 million more people. That's like adding a city larger than Birmingham, Manchester and Leeds combined to our country in just 10 years. Where will they live? How will our already strained NHS cope? What about our roads, our energy supply and our public services? Let's just talk about housing. We're already in the midst of a housing crisis, with young people struggling to get on the property ladder and families squeezed into inadequate accommodation. How are we going to house an additional 4.9 million people? The government's current house building targets are nowhere near sufficient to meet this demand. And it's not just about building houses, it's about infrastructure too. We need hospitals, roads and public transport to support this growing population. Are we prepared for this? The answer is no. The pressure on our housing market will be intense. We're likely to see property prices soar even further out of reach for first-time buyers. Rents will skyrocket, pushing more families into poverty. And let's not forget the impact on our green spaces. To accommodate this population growth, there'll be no choice but to build on our precious countryside, forever altering the landscape of our green and pleasant land. Our NHS is already under immense strain. Waiting lists are at record highs. Staff are stretched to breaking point. How will our health service cope with millions more patients? It's not just about having enough doctors and nurses, though that's certainly a concern. It's about hospital beds, equipment, and the entire capacity of our healthcare system. We're talking about potentially millions more GP appointments, A&E visits, and hospital admissions each year. Our healthcare professionals are already working tirelessly. How much more can we ask of them? What about the impact on waiting times? We could see a situation where life-saving treatments are delayed even further due to the sheer volume of patients. Now, some people argue that immigration is necessary for economic growth. And yes, high-skilled immigrants do make valuable contributions to our economy. But we need to ask ourselves, at what cost? Medium and low-skilled immigrants, who make up the vast majority of people who come to this country, are a net cost to our economy. They receive in services and benefits more than they pay in taxes. Mass immigration might make it look like our GDP is growing, in the same way as adding 5 people to your household would increase your consumption of food, water and electricity. But would it improve your quality of life? No, of course not. Is GDP growth worth sacrificing our quality of life, our sense of cohesion, our sense of identity as a nation? We're already seeing the effects of rapid population growth on our job market. Mass immigration has put downward pressure on salaries and has held down wages in sectors like social care. There's also the question of ageing. Immigrants who are granted indefinite leave to remain will be eligible for a state pension at a cost of potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds and more if they also bring over family members, as they are allowed to do. And let's not forget about the impact on our infrastructure. Our roads are already congested, our public transport overcrowded. Adding millions more people to the mix will only exacerbate these problems. We need massive investment in our transport networks just to keep pace with population growth. There's also the question of cultural integration. Britain has a proud history of welcoming people from around the world, but integration takes time. In some cases, it may not be possible. When immigration happens at such a rapid pace, it can lead to parallel communities, social tension, and a loss of social cohesion. We've seen this play out in other European countries. In France, for instance, the challenges of integrating large immigrant populations have led to social unrest and the rise of extremist political movements. Is this the future we want for Britain? We need to be honest about the challenges of integration. Language barriers, cultural differences, and differing values can all lead to friction. And when those issues aren't addressed, we see the rise in extremism on both sides, from those who reject British values outright and from those who respond with racism. So what's the solution? Well, first and foremost, we need an honest conversation about immigration and population growth. For too long, politicians have shied away from this topic, afraid of being labelled as xenophobic or racist. But we can't afford to bury our heads in the sand any longer. We need an immigration system that puts the needs of British citizens first. The vast majority of people in the UK now believe immigration has been too high over the last decade. If parliamentary sovereignty means anything, the government must act to slash the number of visas given out and reform the indefinite leave to remain system so that those who have come over on the so-called Boris wave do not remain here indefinitely. We also need to take our collapsing birth rates seriously. One of the main drivers for high level of immigration is that we just do not have enough young people growing up to take the place of those who leave the workforce through retirement. In the early 1960s, over 900,000 babies were born each year. Now it's under 600,000. That means when 3 older people retire, there are only 2 young people to take their place. It's no wonder that economic growth is so hard to achieve. I often hear people say that immigration is the solution to the birth rate crisis, but it isn't. Immigrants get old too. They don't have significantly more children than native Brits. And so when they get old, we'll just need more immigrants to pay for their pensions. It's a giant Ponzi scheme. The UK is at a crossroads. The decisions we make now about immigration and population growth will shape our country for generations to come. We can choose to continue down the path of uncontrolled population expansion with all the challenges and strains that brings. Or we can take control and implement policies that ensure sustainable, manageable, organic population growth that benefits all Britons. Because make no mistake, this is about the very future of our nation. It's about preserving our way of life, our values, and our identity as a country. It's about ensuring that Britain remains a place where all its citizens can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for watching. I'm Miriam Cates, and as always, we're here to bring you the stories that matter most to Britain. Don't forget to subscribe to GB News YouTube channel for more.